Hey everyone, welcome back to OnBase. I'm your host, Chris Moody, and today I am very excited to talk to Jessica Rhodes about branding for sales success. Jessica, thanks for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm really glad to have you here, but I am a little nervous because your expertise is so deep in podcasts. We're going to get into your journey, but just let me know if it goes okay. That's the first part because you do this all day, every day for lots of folks. But maybe you could share a little bit about your journey and then also what you're doing today.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, you're doing great so far. So I started, I got into online business and online entrepreneurship simply because I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. My background before I started my business was working for a nonprofit. I was leading their door-to-door field canvas. So I come from the world of door knocking and going up to people's houses and asking them for things. So that's my background. And then when I was pregnant with our first child, I was like, I don't really want to walk around neighborhoods and canvas anymore, having a baby. I started my business. My dad was actually my first client. He's a business coach, had an online newsletter marketing company for like 20 years. And he really introduced me to this world of online business. And he asked me to book him as a guest on podcasts. I mean, this was 2012, 2013 when I was first getting started. As you had a podcast back then too. Like it was a very different landscape than it is today. So I just simply went to Google and started looking up business podcasts to book my dad on. And the interest and the feedback I got from hosts was overwhelmingly positive. Nobody was pitching and booking podcast interviews at that time. So that's what kind of lit the entrepreneurial light bulb in my head. And that's what led me to start my agency, Interview Connection. So I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But on a personal note, I've got 2 kids. I've got my son is now 12 years old. I have a daughter who's 9. We have a lot of animals. We've got chickens, cats, gerbils, fish. Probably more than I'm not thinking of. Yeah, I live in Rhode Island. So that's me in a snapshot.
Well, that's awesome. Yeah, hopefully we'll see pets or kids. Someone crashed the podcast today. I have 4 kids, all under the age of 13. So
You get it.
we know the struggle. They can all pick locks too. I used to have to say that when I was an analyst because it was a little more buttoned up as an analyst. But when someone crashed a call, it was like the news clip of the kid coming in when they're on the broadcast. So yeah, we've been there before. One thing I'm curious about, I think for anyone listening who's been in marketing or sales, we're all used to haggling. And when we make any buying decision, we're kind of pitting folks against each other. We're trying to beat the door down on what's the best deal, end of quarter. I mean, even buying vehicles, like everything in our DNA is conditioned to try to haggle on price. I know that you have a very strong stance on brand identity and how that helps to avoid some of the price-based comparisons. So tell us more about that.
Yeah. So I'm going to share a story just from something like a conversation I was having with my business partner just this week. We got some intel from a prospective client. She was talking to us and one of our main competitors, and she was telling just me a little bit about kind of what she liked about them and sort of like their positioning and what they said they were really focusing on. And so I was talking with my business partner about that because, once you get intel on a competitor, you're like, okay, how can we use this information? How can this help inform our marketing and our positioning? And my business partner, her name is Margie, she said, yeah, we also have to remember people just like us. Like you can have all the best positioning, you can have the best features, the best benefits, you can communicate your expertise. At the end of the day, a really strong brand identity, you are going to close sales and win business because there's going to be people that are like, yeah, it logically, you or your competitors, they all make sense, but I like you guys. My business partner and I we're kind of, people call us the dynamic duo. We used to work together at that door-to-door field canvas job. We co-host our podcast together. We just have a really fun vibe. And so we have a lot of clients that are just like, I just love Jess and Margie. And so that's really the brand identity, is like letting your personality come through your marketing, because people will logically go through the checklist of the pros and cons of the different companies, but they're going to go with the company that they just like more.
Yeah, okay. This follow-up question that we haven't talked about here, but we have lived this one a lot. We're in a very, every MarTech company, sales tech company, very competitive spaces, right? There's always an RFP. We know that that's part of the game. I think at Demandbase, we have run into that quite a bit. In my first project, once I joined, they were my client when I was an analyst. So I knew a lot about Demandbase and the competitive set. They were also my clients. And one of the value props was on the people. And when you put
Mhm.
that on a slide or you tell someone, it feels so cookie cutter and me too, and everyone says that. But when customers feel it, they feel it, and then they would talk about it. I'm curious
Mhm.
though, when companies or personal brands, anyone listening, the likability factor, how do you best articulate that to someone who hasn't quite experienced it yet?
I don't think you can articulate it to someone who has, you have to show it. Like people will walk away, all the time. The vast majority of our leads will walk away from our sales call with me or my sales team and they'll be like, I really like you guys. I like you, Douglas. I like you, Julio. I like you, Jess. Like we're very likable, but unless they really spend time with us outside of a sales conversation, that likability on a sales call isn't always going to be enough to close the deal. You have to have that likability and the personality and the brand identity through every touch point of the sales and marketing journey. And a lot of that journey is going to happen before they enter your pipeline. They're going to be listening to your content, following you on social media, asking people about you that have worked with you before. Excuse me. So you need to have that likability and that personality in your marketing. You can't rely on the sales call for it.
Yeah, I love that. And we're going to ask a question about podcasts on a podcast. So this is very meta, inception like here. How do podcasts help to establish thought leadership and to strengthen that brand identity?
Yeah. So, I mean, number one, like I'm here having a conversation with you, your listeners, they already know you. So the fact that you're bringing me on your podcast, like they know, they trust that you're not going to bring on a hack and somebody that's not legit. You're not going to damage your reputation by bringing someone on that could potentially do your customers harm or do your audience wrong. So, number one, there's already a trust between me and you. We've already had a conversation off air. So, that's number one, how it builds up your credibility and your thought leadership. When you're on a podcast, you're able to speak for whether it's 15 to 20 minutes with a shorter interview or some podcasts go up to an hour. If you are not able to speak eloquently with leadership, with authority on your topic, then you're not good. Like you're not a thought leader. But if you can, people hear that and they're like, I trust you. I mean, we had a sales call with a really hot lead that heard a podcast appearance that I was on. And he's like, damn, this is gold. I need to talk to these guys. His words exactly. I'm like, yep, that works.
Yeah, it's such an important point. And for those of us who talk at events and, after the event, whether that's a restaurant or bar, no assumptions, right? But the behind the scenes conversation, I know I've had this one a ton with folks about being your whole self at work and being the entire you. I do think that's a lot easier when you're talking to people. But for those listening who may be in organizations where they haven't quite embraced bringing their entire personality to work, do you have any advice there? Because I do feel like there are strong parallels to hanging out on a podcast once you
Mhm.
figure out, hey, this works a lot better if you're Jessica and I'm Chris and I'm not Chris from Demand Base, right? Like I have made that mistake before at
Yeah.
larger companies, but I'd love to get your thoughts, especially knowing that many folks haven't quite turned the corner on how to be their whole selves at work.
Listen, I really empathize with that because as an agency founder, as an agency owner, I never desired to have a personal brand. Like I'm not an influencer, a coach where it's me. Like you hire Interview Connections, you work with my team. Like so I still sometimes grapple with like, okay, how do I really leverage my personal brand and bring myself into it, knowing that it's also like it's its own entity. The company is its own thing. There's a whole team that provides the service. So first I want to start out by saying like it is always kind of a challenge, but my business mentor name is Melanie Ann Layer. She was coaching us on this and she goes, it's really powerful. You're going to have people that, look up your firm and choose your firm because you do a great job. You have great testimonials. And then there's going to be a lot of people who come to you because they ask around and someone says, I know a girl. Yeah, Jessica Rhodes does that. And so I think really understanding and getting that when you do bring your full self into your marketing, it is more powerful. People do want to work with people that they know, they like, they trust, they hear about through their friends. And so finding ways to bring your personality into your marketing is super, super important. It just makes it more entertaining to follow you, to watch you. So for me, like I just find different ways to bring it into the marketing. And it's still a little bit challenging because it's like, okay, how much of my personal life am I sharing on the business Instagram page? But that is why I like podcasts, bringing it back because it's a normal conversation. I've mentioned like the animals and my kids and where I live, and that comes out a little bit more organically in conversation. Your personality comes out more organically than trying to figure out like, well, what do I say in this post? I mean, just today I wrote a piece of content about like, I had a conversation with my husband and I were just chatting over coffee, and he was like, oh, I saw Ed Sheeran was on like 3 podcasts that I listened to, like 3 of his podcasts that he subscribed to. Ed Sheeran was interviewed and he was on one of the podcasts I listened to. I'm like, wow, he must be promoting something. And my husband's like, yeah, now I'm on an Ed Sheeran kick. I keep listening to his music. I'm like, podcast guesting works. And so I wrote a piece of content about that. And I'm like, okay, I'm just giving people a little, like, they now know what my husband and I talked about at 7 a.m, and it's relevant to the content. So I just think finding ways to bring yourself into your marketing is a way to kind of engage people.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can't fake the passion. So to your point, love that. Let's tackle the now what. We do a podcast. We finish the podcast. It's great. We do our virtual high five. We close the tabs. We go to our next meetings. But how can we turn that podcast content into true thought leadership that we can share on more places?
Yeah. So, I mean, literally number one, right? We close the tab. What are we doing next? Like, I'm going to tell you what I'm doing is I'm emailing you. I'm sending you a link to schedule a call, like something we talk. We need to talk more. So that's number one. My biggest tip for podcast guests is don't let that connection with the host fizzle out, because they're going to go interview dozens of other people and forget about you if you don't make an effort to stay in touch. So stay connected with the host. Make sure you're connected on LinkedIn, Instagram, wherever the place is. I like to do a little post on social media right after the interview, like while I still have my headphones on, the microphone up in front of me, like, hey, I just did an interview, with Chris and blah, 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 and like talk a little bit about it, tag the host. So now you're creating real, like, behind the scenes in the moment content, because a lot of our marketing posts are pre-written. They're just kind of 2D, like they're just not super exciting. So when you add some like in the moment behind the scenes video content, it does, like, it's just more interesting. People like to follow it a lot more. And then once the interview is live, now you can use things like Opus Clip to create a whole bunch of clips from the podcast interview, put that up on your social medias, get the transcript of the interview, turn that into written content. But my favorite way to use these podcast appearances is in my sales and marketing. I will send out podcast appearances to my entire list. We have a text list. I'll text it out. That always gets a spike in downloads and listens, books, calls. I also always send a podcast interview to prospective clients before they have a sales call with me or my team. So that way, if they haven't listened to me on a podcast, they at least have one interview that they could listen to before they have a consultation call. So those are a bunch of different ways that you can repurpose the interviews.
Love it. Okay, I'm going to twist your arm on this. I haven't done this on a podcast episode yet. I think we should sign up together to do this episode, and then we create a piece of content, whether it's written or video or a podcast about podcasts that we do after. But let's actually go through what happened after and then share that with LinkedIn of what I did and what you did and what we did. And what I think that would be really cool. You probably already done it, but if not, I am happy to sign up to do this with you, to bring folks into the behind the scenes of how we're actually turning this into something bigger, so we could hook it into the blog post too.
I love that. And that's just a little accountability partner activity to make sure we follow all of our own advice.
All right, we're on. And watch, that'll be the viral thing that we do. There we go. Boom.
Yes.
All right. We solved it right there. There's our ROI.
Perfect.
Let's talk about the uniqueness of podcasts. So we have all the marketing methods and techniques and channels and everything that we're used to doing. But what are some of the unique benefits for podcasts?
So one thing that we haven't talked about that I'm always shouting from the rooftops, because most people don't think about it, is the SEO value of podcasts. Like, when you're on a podcast, the host of the show is writing up a blog post about the episode. They're putting a backlink to your website. They're putting the video version of the interview up on YouTube. You're getting so much, you're building your online footprint to the point where people Google you. Not only is your website hopefully coming up on page 1 of Google, but all of these podcast appearances are coming up on Google. So building your online footprint, increasing your domain authority with all these backlinks, like, that's probably my favorite benefit of podcast guesting, is just increasing your online footprint, because most business owners and entrepreneurs are they're not investing in SEO yet. Like actually investing in SEO is something that comes like later in business, like up into 7 figures in revenue. If you're 6 figures and below, you're probably not doing any SEO investment. This is the best way to invest in your SEO and really increase your organic traffic.
Awesome. Yeah, and we look, long tail, whatever, it will pay off when you get the right search. We know that that will pay off. We have a question from the audience that gets a little deep, and I think you're going to like this one though. How has your approach to decision making evolved throughout your career, and what's the most valuable lesson you've learned about making tough decisions?
Okay. So this is like a topic that, or my answer to this question brings in a subject matter that I wouldn't probably bring up on like most marketing podcasts. But have you ever heard, Chris, of human design?
I have. Yes.
Okay, great. So human design, I define it like astrology on steroids. So it takes like your place of birth, the time of your birth, like all this stuff, and you get like two numbers. I'm a 2-4 generator with a sacral authority. So the sacral authority is basically like your gut intuition. So when I'm making a decision, and my business partner is the exact same human design. So we're the same. We both have a sacral authority. So for us, like we just get that gut. Sometimes we don't know the decision right away if we're kind of waffling, but we're just kind of like, let it sit. And the sacral authority kind of, we hear it, like we hear the answer. And so I just get that gut answer. And I'm like, sacral says this. And so that's something I've learned about only in the past year. I think before it was a lot of like research and asking for opinions from like my business coach. Like, what do they think? What's the correct answer? But now how my decision making evolved is like trusting my sacral authority and just going with it. And that's really it, trusting myself.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, those who have listened to lots of episodes have heard me tell this story before, but there have been points in my career where I've over-indexed for various things. And one of my favorite was I need to invest in working with amazing people. And my wife and I went and I spoke at an event for free. I met all their customers. My wife and I both went to lunch with the entire leadership team. And then we took a vacation after and just sat there and took less money. But it was one of the best jobs I've ever taken because it was listening to your gut, kind of overcorrecting based on things that had happened in your previous role. And yeah, I mean, the rest is history. You look back on those decisions 5, 10, 15 years ago, and they always work out when you follow your intuition.
Yeah. And if I could just add a little bit to that, like also having a regulated nervous system is really key because I think in the past, like before I learned about like neurosomatic work and, you know, processing stress and processing emotions, a lot of the incorrect decisions were more of like a stress response, like a trauma response, people pleasing, like what do I think is going to make other people happy? But since I've learned all these different tools to calm my nervous system and be in a grounded place where I'm like, nope, this is the correct decision. It's not because I'm trying to make this person happy or trying to protect myself from a certain threat. It's just like, this is correct and I can handle whatever comes from it. That's also been really big.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out therapy and normalizing therapy. I know, yeah, some of my trauma I used to call superpowers. And then my therapist was like, why do you call that a superpower? She was like, it's actually not what that is. It's a trauma response that has worked well for you, but here are the things you need to, yeah, where you go.
Exactly.
You know, that's painful, but smart. Okay, cool. This is a simple question, and I'm being sarcastic for those who can't see the video. What is the single biggest challenge in B2B marketing?
For me, I think the single biggest challenge in B2B marketing is the fact that when you're selling to B2B, there's multiple decision makers. So that's not always true if you're talking to like a business coach who's like they're the sole owner and they don't have a team. But as you sell to B2B, whether it's you're talking to a CMO, a COO, you have a lot of people in the decision making room. And most of the time, you've got an info gatherer that does the sales call with you. So they're getting all the information, but all your normal sales strategies don't really work because they're like, I'm not the decision maker. That I find is the biggest challenge.
Yeah, totally. I think that is a big challenge. All right. Look, Jessica, you have made it to the lightning round. Now we have a couple questions that are really, really fast. The first, which I think you've covered one already. What are your favorite tools and technology that you're using today?
So one of my favorite tools and technology, we use a software called Allaware for outbound dialing and bulk texting. Love it.
Awesome. And you did mention Opus Clip as well.
Oh, yes. Opus Clip, HubSpot. I could go on, Chris, but we're lightning round, so I'm trying to keep it short.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. What about Goodreads? Favorite book, blog, newsletter, podcast? And you can mention multiple here because you're very connected to the podcast scene.
Okay, so I'm guilty of like I'm not a big reader, but I will say the business books that have moved the needle for me the most is Alex Hormozy's books, $100 Million Offer, $100 Million Leads. I think he's got a third one in that trilogy, or maybe it hasn't come out yet. But the Alex Hormozy books have moved the needle. His podcast, his episodes about sales, chef's kiss, have been amazing.
Awesome. You mentioned a person there. So the next question is about great people. Who inspires you in the B2B space?
Oh, good question. Well, definitely Alex Hormozy in the B2B space. I absolutely go to him for like B2B stuff. But I also want to shout out Melanie Ann Layer. She is my business mentor and I work with her. I wouldn't call her a B2B. Well, her clients are business owners, but yeah, I'm in her program and I love her.
Outstanding. Well, you crushed it. We have one very important question. How can people get in touch with you after this podcast episode?
Yeah. So interviewconnections.com. If you want my free gift, you could go to interviewconnections.com/prep and you can get an interview prep checklist. So you can follow all these steps that Chris and I are going to follow after the interview. That's all on the checklist at interviewconnections.com/prep.
Love it. I'm going to have to grade myself and see how well I did going through the prep checklist after we did the episode too, just to kind of hold myself accountable.
See how prepared you were.
That's right. That's right. I think I aced it.
You were very prepared. Yeah.
I did a lot of stalking and looked at mutual connections, all the things we do, right? Like just
Amazing.
be prepared for everything. Well, outstanding. Jessica, thanks so much for joining us on this episode and really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.